Our guest today is a man who has dedicated his life to entertaining the world with breathtaking effects in films such as Star Trek, Blade Runner, and more. Welcome to Celebrate Michigan, the show produced on the campus of Madonna University. I'm Chris Benson. Today we have writer, director, and special effects pioneer Douglas Trumbull. It is an honor to have you. I feel like I need to call you Mr. Trumbull. I hope you don't.
No, just call me Doug. That's
okay,
fine.
all right.
That'd be better.
I'll try, but it's going to be difficult. Reading through that list of accomplishments, that's a lot of, and that's not even a fraction of, I know, what your work, your body of work is. Yeah. How did all this begin for you? Where did this start? What's the origin story?
The origin story for me is, as a very young guy, I had two dynamics going on. One was I was watching television, which was every Sunday night there was like a show called The Wonderful World of Disney. Mm-hmm. And Walt put on these shows every Sunday night about building Disneyland or making a movie or interviewing Wernher von Braun about getting to the moon and all this kind of stuff. So I was kind of doing that. My father had been in the movie business before I was born and had left the movie business before I was born. So it was kind of lore of the background. And he was a young guy working on The Wizard of Oz and other movies. Wow. As a young physical effects guy, you know, rigging wire rigs for flying monkeys and things like that. So that was not a strong theme in my background, but the theme that I think was most pervasive was that my mother was an artist. She was a commercial artist, a ceramicist and painter. My father was an engineer, and so I was around machinery and tools and lathes and drill presses and milling machines and welders and stuff all through my childhood.
Creative people too, people who were creating tangible things.
Yeah, my father was kind of an inventor type, fearless guy who ended up with a lot of patents and was a really clever, amazing guy. So that was my comfort zone, was a combination of the two weird genetic codes that got into me somehow, which was creativity and technology. It's like the theme of what I do, which is trying to find solutions for creative problems that emerged in all the movies I worked on and do it in some visual way that is groundbreaking if it can be. I'm always trying to do something new and weird, and I'm completely fearless when it comes to bolting together some object or putting a motor on a lens or making some mechanical device work in the service of some visual phenomena. And then that became directing movies and writing movies, and so I'm kind of a more rounded filmmaker now than I was then.
Were you afraid of failure at points in the piece? Because I'm getting that sense from you.
No.
You know, seeing you now at this point in your career, looking backwards, but thinking back to the beginning, was that ever even a factor for you?
Yeah, I would say this, and it stems from a recent experience I just had last week.
Okay.
With a really interesting man who grew up with Asperger's.
Yes.
And I said, well, what's that? And he wrote a book. He gave me, here's my book. This is all my experience with Asperger's. Sure. And it's part of the autism spectrum.
Yes.
And I'm saying, wow, that really is resonating with me, because I felt that way as a child all the time. Very intimidated, very unemotional, very hard to have eye contact with anybody. And so that was kind of one of my problems, I think, as a young person growing up, was just being happy with my little widgets and my little workshop and my soldering iron and everything, but never really being good with interpersonal stuff.
And yet I have a feeling that intense, focused interest on the pieces and things you were interested in, which is part of Asperger's, helped you focus in a way that probably was uncharacteristic for your age at the time, and even further gave you that ability to focus with such intensity to accomplish what you've done.
Something like that, yes.
Okay,
yeah.
okay. And I think I had read when just reading about you and learning about you that there were times where you worked nonstop for many days to accomplish the task.
Yeah.
So looking back now, what do you attribute that drive to? Was it just this interest that you had, or were you just not satisfied with what was the product? What was it?
You know, it's very hard for me from inside myself to describe what that is, but I would say it's like an OCD kind of thing, is that I get so obsessed with some challenge that comes up that I just will not rest until I solve it. And so I sleep with it, I sleep on it, I think about it, I write about it, I draw pictures about it, I do all kinds of stuff until I figure it out. And that can be anything from a small little thing I'm working on for a movie or not a movie or life or an animal feeder or whatever. So I get obsessed with things.
And do you
that
find,
occupies my entire objective and spirit, at that time.
so I think of the different scenes of the movie, some of the more famous ones, of course, 2001, the Stargate scene and those things. Is that how you produced those? Did those come to you fully formed?
No.
What was that process as you went through that? How
Well,
satisfied were you with what you produced too?
I think the Stargate is kind of a good example of that because it was a big machine I had to build. And I'm on this movie, a very young kid, and I became kind of Kubrick's mascot in a way. It was really interesting. He was a very interesting and complicated human being. But the guys that were already on the movie, seasoned professionals and illustrators and photographers, cinematographers, editors, they could not figure out what to do for the Stargate. It was just, everybody was completely perplexed. And I started thinking about it. I never even thought it was my job to solve the problem, but I started thinking about it from the point of view of time and space. That was it. It was supposed to be the transition through time and space to another universe or another dimension, really. And I had an experience previously on the work I was doing for the New York World's Fair with a guy named John Whitney, who had come up with this very interesting idea that I thought was fascinating, which was the idea that if you have you're taking a photograph with a camera, you leave the shutter open and move lights around.
Yeah.
And those lights get accumulated on the film as a pattern or a shape or an object or whatever. And he did some of that photography for this movie called To the Moon and Beyond, which is what ultimately got me my job with Kubrick, to make a long story short. And I started thinking about that idea. And I thought, well, the original idea for the Stargate in 2001 was going to be a slot in a planet. That one of the moons of Jupiter would have this hole in it that you could look down the hole, and if you looked to the far end of the hole, you would see another universe out there, a complete conundrum.
And the conundrum I have is that I have to interrupt a brilliant man telling me about an amazing movie. I have to go to a commercial, but this is a great cliffhanger. We'll be right back on Celebrate Michigan with Douglas Trumbull. Stay tuned.
Because of you, I felt hopeless.
I know it was a joke, but it still hurt me.
Because of you, I felt wanted and not alone in this world.
Because you said hi to me on the first day of school, I felt included, and I knew that I was going to be okay.
I want to see the world.
When you pick up a book,
I used to read every night to all the younger kids,
and let your imagination break free, you won't believe how much fun it can be.
Let down your house!
Experience a world of adventure, excitement, and endless possibilities. Get tangled up in a good book. Explore new worlds. Read. Visit read.gov today.
Yes, ready.
Oh, come on, Randy. Animal shelter, here I come. And no, I'm not crazy or emotionally damaged. That's a stereotype. I just belong to a total loser. I'm a good dog. So if you want a pet, adopt. And if you see Randy, tell him he dropped his wallet.
Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why did the girl ask the mushroom to dance?
Because he was a fun guy.
What do you call a pig that knows karate? Pork chop. So how does a tissue dance? Put a little boogie on it.
Welcome back to Celebrate Michigan. I'm Chris Benson. We're here again with visual effects innovator and creative pioneer, Douglas Trumbull. And it felt like a crime when I was interrupting you in like the middle of this wonderful discussion of the effects that you created for 2001. And we had this cliffhanger, at the end of that. But would you like to continue that thought?
Sure. I'll try to do it as quickly as I can.
Please.
Okay, you have to imagine this idea of looking through a slot in a planet. Well, what is it? Rock strata, a molten core, I don't know. It could be any kind of thing, but it all seemed completely boring to us. So, well, that's not it. That's not a transit through space and time. That doesn't answer the question. So this idea of the streak photography that John Whitney had developed came to me, and I said, oh, that might be the answer if we did something like that. And so the idea I developed from that was, instead of moving stuff around in front of the camera like this, I wanted to move stuff in the camera dimensionally as depth. And I kind of came up with this idea. I said, well, if we had a little thin slit of light lit from behind, it would be like a neon tube, for instance. If you can imagine a neon tube and you move it toward the camera while the shutter's open, it's going to create a plane of light, okay? That's the beginning of the Stargate idea. If behind that slit you move some artwork that's got patterns and colors on it, those patterns and colors will be applied to this plane and become an image of some kind. It's called focal plane shutter in old cameras. So I developed that idea, and I shot a little Polaroid photograph of it for Stanley Kubrick. And I was so excited when I saw this first plane of light, which I shot on the animation stand. We had a camera that looked down and had a Polaroid camera on it. And I got this Polaroid photograph of this plane of light. And in those days, you had to put some fixative on your Polaroid, which was kind of a wet chemical. And even though it was wet, I was so excited. I walked down to Stanley Kubrick's office and I handed him this wet Polaroid. I said, I think we can do this Stargate. And he said, yes, I get it. Because he was really smart. He said he got it instantly. He said, what do you need? I said, well, I want to build a big machine, which will do this on a big scale, like as big as this room almost. The slit is going to be 6 feet high. The piece of glass that the artwork's on is going to be 12 feet wide, and the track is going to be 15 feet deep. And he said, go ahead, just do it. Whatever you need, just do it. That was like heaven.
To be in your 20s, your early 20s.
To be in my 20s. And so then that would lead to authorization from Mr. Stanley Kubrick to be driven by his driver in his Rolls Royce into downtown London to buy the parts.
Who gets to do that?
Who gets to do that? I was mascot, so it was awesome. And it was that kind of unique experience that just motivated me to just do more and more and more of that. So I kept providing stuff, and that led to another technique that was creating Jupiter for the movie. The destination for the movie is Jupiter, and no one could paint Jupiter. So I took that plane thing and turned it into a sphere thing and made a machine I called the Jupiter machine. It's going to be the title of a book I'm working on.
Okay, stay tuned.
That's a secret. Don't tell anybody.
I won't. Don't tell anyone. Okay.
It's all about that idea of kind of technology in the service of telling a story and art, because the idea of making an image on a screen, and this was Cinerama in these days. These were 90-foot wide, deeply curved screens in specially equipped theaters. I felt it had the power to be transformational for the audience, a trippy kind of thing.
It was trippy,
It was very trippy. And Kubrick was very conscious of that. He said, I want to make a movie that is not melodramatic. I really don't care about plot twists and tension or artificial movie tricks to get your audience engaged. I want the audience to be in the movie. I want you to be in space.
And you even took that farther from this.
I've been doing it for 50 years.
And then creating not just movies, but this idea of experience is so important to you. It seems you've actually worked on. I call them rides, but I mean they're more than a ride.
I have done rides. I've done rides. Yeah.
And that transition sounds like it was very natural for you to go from here it is on a screen to actually moving people through.
Absolutely.
What were some of the what was your favorite ride experience that you designed?
I started the whole idea of adapting flight simulation technology to entertainment. I had a little company I set up with Paramount to explore the future of entertainment, and I said, well, I think we'll build a flight simulator that's a movie theater on hydraulic rams. So they said, okay, and we started doing that. So I started developing that technology, and that led to, years later actually, it morphed into the Back to the Future ride for Universal Studios and Steven Spielberg, based on the trilogy of Back to the Future movies by Bob Zemeckis. So no one, including Bob Zemeckis or Steven Spielberg or Universal, knew how to make this movie. And I got hired to come in and figure it out. And I said, this is a gas. This is going to be so much fun.
Sure.
And so I wrote a story that I gave to Steven. I said, because I knew Steven already, you know, because we'd worked on Close Encounters. And he said, I think I know what'll hit his hot buttons.
Yeah.
You know. And we got the go-ahead to make this ride, which was basically a DeLorean car drive-in theater in a dome screen.
So creative.
Okay, 12 DeLorean cars parked in one screen. So it's a movie theater.
Sure.
But each car is on a hydraulic ram. And the whole trick was to photograph the movie in such a way that the movement of the camera would exactly synchronize with the movement of the cars.
Incredible.
Which turned out to be completely counterintuitive, but it worked out great. Because there had been a company hired before me to do this ride. And they were testing cameras and testing motion bases, and everybody's throwing up. I mean, they were throwing up consistently.
Motion sickness is a thing, yes.
Motion sickness was really bad. And they said, well, we have a major problem. We have to find somebody to come in and solve this. So I said, oh, okay.
Volunteer.
Volunteer. And that was just one of the most fun projects I ever did, because it went all the way into an image that's completely around you. It fills your peripheral vision. It's a dome projection screen like a planetarium. You're in a DeLorean car, and the story is about you entering into the movie. You're becoming part of the movie. You're no longer an observer or a third-person voyeur. You're in the movie, and it's happening to you. That was what that ride was about. That was my total hot button. So.
And I know the many people who've been to the amusement parks across the United States and internationally have loved that. And we're going to take you for a ride just after this commercial, because we are going to have Douglas Trumbull back, and he's going to be talking about something new that you might not have heard about, Magi technology. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made home ownership happen. Homeschooling yourself on loans, beefing up your credit score.
So I'm pre-approved.
You were like, yes! Sorry. Color coding listings, ticking boxes, and flushing every toilet in a 20-mile radius. Home sweet home. You aced house hunting. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
Oh, look, a redhead. Staring contest. You still got it. I know.
Come alive with the forest.
The dad was cute.
They were looking right at us.
Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
I surrender, I surrender.
All right, pal. Get ready for the day, buddy.
Hey, Dad. Hey, Dad. Do we have a gun?
What's that?
Do we have a gun?
Welcome back to Celebrate Michigan. I'm here with the incredible creative pioneer, Douglas Trumbull, and we were talking in the last segment about this experience, about making movies not just a static experience, but a very dynamic experience.
Right.
And you've done that with the creation of some flight simulation sort of rides, but Flight Simulation Plus.
Yeah.
Sounds like that really influenced you and perhaps may have had an impact in what you're doing now. Will you tell us about what does the future look like?
Okay, you have to imagine for a moment that a movie is a bunch of still photographs projected in rapid succession. You know, they're photographed in a sequence and they're projected in a sequence onto a screen, okay? And it uses persistence of vision. Human brains have a way of seeing a bunch of images like that, and it says, oh, it looks like motion, it looks like a real thing, and so it's matured over the years, but not very much. And the standard frame rate of movies, which is 24 frames per second, was previously 18 or 16 for silent movies, but when sound came in, it went to 24. So if you imagine a movie being projected on a screen, it's that big, or it's your television screen, or it's your movie screen in your theater, and it's a whole bunch of stills, actually. And the distance between one and the next, one frame and the next, may only be an inch on the screen, depending upon the motion of the camera or whoever's riding the horse or whatever. In a dome, or on a bigger screen like Cinerama was for 2001, it's tremendously expanded.
Sure, amplified.
And so the amplification of the distance between one frame and the next became, from an inch, became a foot.
Yeah.
And suddenly your persistence of vision stops working.
Sure.
It fails altogether, and it just becomes a juddering kind of thing. And we saw this, and that was part of what was making everybody so nauseated in the Back to the Future ride.
Yes, understood.
You just can't get it together. Your brain just can't deal with it. And that's when I had this big epiphany that if you increase the frame rate and compensate for that, it'll be smoother again. It's very simple and obvious, right?
To you.
Well, so I was stuck with 24 frames for the Back to the Future ride, and we had to figure out how to tell a story that didn't have a lot of blurring and strobing. So that was what I had, this idea that if we just put something in the foreground that's not moving very much while the background is moving a lot, then that'll give you something to focus on that's not blurred.
Awesome.
That informed the idea of chasing another DeLorean car, which was the story about Biff stealing Doc Brown's car. So the whole thing was designed in reverse, based upon the shortcomings of film. And so that was what happened there. So I'm having this big sudden understanding about the nature of movies and how parts of it don't work particularly when you go to a large screen. And I love large screens. We had problems with Kubrick on 2001 with stars because it was all animated. There's so much of 2001 is animated, which means every frame is dead sharp. And if you move it too far, your retina in your eye, your persistence of vision will actually merge two frames together, and a star will become two stars. And it's very disturbing to see two stars where there should be only one. We couldn't figure this out until we realized, oh, it's the shutter in the projector that's making you see more than one frame at once in your persistence of vision. So that's led to this thing I've been developing, which is how to increase the frame rate to as good as video, which is 60, or even better, which could be double that. So I'm working now at 120 frames per second.
And that's what Magi is,
That's
correct?
what Magi is, 120 frames per second, 4K, 2D or 3D, on very big, deeply curved hemispherical screens. And it's like a big flight simulator. It's like a movie that has become a flight simulator.
So this is going to come to theaters near me?
I hope so. You know, before it's too late. You know, I've only got so many years to go before I can keep pounding away at this. But Hollywood doesn't want to see this yet. They're not ready for it. The industry's not ready for it. But Corey Jacobson here at Phoenix Theaters is ready for it. And we talk about it all the time. So that's why I'm here. That's why we're doing this thing, because we're buddies and we're trying to figure out, well, what's the future?
How do we make it work?
What's the future of cinema? How can we make it better?
Well, and you've always been, it seems to me like you've always been a little bit ahead of your time. Maybe not, maybe more than a little bit ahead.
It can be painful, yes.
It's a blessing and a curse, right? Because it has led to some really innovative pieces, you know, Blade Runner, a personal favorite of mine, and just some of the other pieces and works that you've done are so ahead of their time. They're very different than anything that you're seeing in the time period they were created. What do you think is going to be the effect of Magi coming into film industry?
My objective is to just make any movie become better and more spectacular and more immersive, and hopefully more inspirationally transformational. I think movies have a responsibility to deliver something bigger than just some stupid story about who loves who and who's killing who and who's chasing who.
That I can
think
watch
it
on
can
my
be
phone?
bigger. No, it ain't gonna. On your phone, it's not gonna happen.
I knew I was hitting a button there.
Stories
Okay.
work on your phone. Experiences do not. Okay, so if you want a big immersive experience, it better be on a big screen in a big theater and a whole new kind of technology that we have to develop, and then take that technology to the creative industry and say, here, you, movie director, writer, producer, cinematographer, here is how it works. Go for it. That's what I want to do. I want to just like get out of the way and say, here is a totally new tool set to make a new kind of movie and a new way to show movies, because I think the audience is craving this kind of thing. Inspirational, immersive experiences is what virtual reality promises and doesn't deliver.
And I would love for you to talk about, I know we just have a minute left, but I would love for you to talk about that. During the break, we talked about community and this idea of people experience together. I know we just have a minute.
There's kind of electricity in the room. When you're in a theater and everybody's crying together or weeping together or laughing together or applauding or whatever, that's a communal thing. That's us around the campfire. You know, the movie has become the campfire. And I think that's where truth happens. And movies are a kind of very powerful emotional surrogate way for us to safely reveal or experience emotional stuff without being embarrassed or humiliated. You know, a movie theater is kind of a safe place. It's dark. No one can see the expression on your face or the tears in your eye or whatever. And you can go into the story. That's why it's so good. That's why it's so powerful.
I love that. I am so pleased that you came to join us on Celebrate Michigan today. This is a treat, and I know our local viewers are going to say, oh, wait, how did he get on there? So thank you for spending time with us and for sharing your vision of what the future looks like.
Thank you.
And thank you for staying tuned to Celebrate Michigan, where we keep talking about all the great things that are happening in Michigan. We know you're going to see something soon on the big screen related to Doug's work. And so thank you, and we'll see you at the movies. Take care.